Well, all right, welcome, welcome. My name is Avra Robinson, and I'm an instructor with EdTechTeacher. And all summer long, we have had this series of workshops going on, and this is the last one. It's a combination with the Department of Ed and us, and we've been exploring Google tools, looking at it from all different angles. And our angle this morning is reflections on learning and digital portfolios, looking at ways that digital portfolios can not only chronicle all of the amazing things that are happening in your classroom, but also give your students a chance to pause and look at what they've created, look at what they're doing, thinking about not only what they learned, but why and how they learned it, I think is often the angle that I like to take. So the way I'm going to kind of roll this morning is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to talk through some ideas and some slides, but then I'm going to pull my screen share down, and I'm going to encourage you to interact with me and share your ideas. We're going to kick it off in just a minute with what you think a digital portfolio is or what it means to you when I say digital portfolio. But let me start with just once again, just doing a quick introduction, saying hi. For those of you, I can see people are still joining us this morning. So this is the 6th session in a series of workshops where we've been exploring Google Workspace for education. And my name's Avra, and we are talking digital portfolios this morning. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. Would you please share your thoughts and tell me, if I say the words digital portfolio, what does that mean to you? Go ahead and type in the chat. Just something that comes to mind when you think digital portfolio. Collection of material learned during a unit. Absolutely. Examples of work. Yes. Student work on a digital platform, online way to demonstrate learning, measure of growth, opportunity to reflect. Absolutely. Record of student examples, collection of material, compilation of work over a period of time. Absolutely. Yep. Collection of materials accessible online. Absolutely. Alternative assessment and fun. I love that. That's fantastic, Kimberly. Collection of student work stored electronically. Yep. You guys, you've nailed it. Exactly. Student accomplishments and learning. Collection of materials digitally. Notebook of student assessments. Absolutely. Student work presented online. Student learning and growth reflection. Modern day trapper keeper. Carlos. That's fantastic. I ask this question all the time, and I've never gotten that answer. That's fantastic. I am an 80s girl, so I definitely had a trapper keeper, and I kind of wish they still existed. So I love it. You guys, exactly. So you understand the concept of digital portfolios. What we're going to look at this morning is kind of, what we want to think about as we embark on a journey toward digital portfolios, as well as, just some very granular questions about what we might put in there and how we might structure it and the scope. Just, what I do in this session is kind of let you learn from my mistakes, because what happened was years ago, I fell in love with this idea. I took a master's class back in, I don't know, maybe 2007 or 2008. Fell in love with the idea of digital portfolios and just kind of dove straight into it and never looked back, and thought I was going to do a K-8 and every single kid was going to have one, and it was going to be this amazing, gigantic project. And well, let's put it this way, it didn't quite go the way I expected. So let me share with you some thoughts about digital portfolios, and feel free to keep your chats coming. I will glance over from time to time, guys. I've got the chat on another monitor, as well as all of you. So if you've got anything to share, please feel free to do so with one another. And if I miss a question, by all means, repeat it, or we'll have time at the end probably for some reflection and questions too. So what is a digital portfolio? You guys answered it. It's a collection of artifacts of learning, right? It's that chance for an expansion of skills and knowledge. It's an opportunity for kids to show growth over time. And it's that evidence, or, evidence of learning and mastery, possibly. And then from my perspective, one of the wonderful things, it's this awesome opportunity for pride and joy and that celebration of learning at all age levels. I think it's really important for kids to look back at what they've done and go, oh, wow, look at that. And, I think about the world that we're in right now, and like last year, and how it can feel so frustrating at times to have a disruption in our normal processes. And it'd be really easy to kind of go, oh, you know what, we didn't get anything done this year. But if you had a digital portfolio process in place, it might be an opportunity to look back and go, you know what, look at all this stuff we actually did get to do, right? Look at all this learning that did happen. I think not only for kids to feel that joy and that pride and celebration, but it's important for you as teachers too, because teachers sometimes are hard on themselves. And it's important for you to realize that you do some amazing things in your classroom. So keep that in mind as we move along. Let's begin by talking about the types of digital portfolios. And this is just a handful. But when I think about digital portfolios, the first one that comes to mind is that showcase or presentation portfolio, right? So we're going to take, maybe our best work, and we're going to curate it and organize it and put it into something that we can share with others and present. And if you're an elementary teacher and you're not necessarily publishing student work online, depending on the rules of your acceptable use policy, maybe you've got a portfolio night where parents or guardians or families come in and they take a look at the cool things that kids have created. That's one possibility, right? And if you are an 11th, 12th grade teacher, as some of you mentioned, maybe you are building something that's public and you're teaching students to share their work online in an appropriate way. So that's one possibility. And then another possibility is the idea of that growth or learning or progress portfolio, where it's not just the best stuff, but hey, it's also the stuff where we struggled. It's also the stuff where it was a challenge at first. I was doing a session like this several months ago, and I had a teacher speak up and say, you know what, I have kids collect all different artifacts and curate them, but I always tell them they have to pick one disaster. And so he was a middle school teacher, and I think he taught either English or social studies, I don't remember, but I loved the idea of, hey, you have to pick a disaster, because to me, that said, disasters happen. We all make mistakes. We all learn, right? And so it spoke mistake tolerance to me. I loved the idea of that. So absolutely, you can look at it from a presentation perspective, like hey, showcase all this cool stuff, but you can also look at it as, look at everything we've done to learn and grow. And then some teachers use it, like as that checklist. Again, I had another teacher say that she had taken her standards and she had built out artifacts, activities, assignments that she was going to have kids create and do. She made a checklist of them, and that was everything that was going to get included in that portfolio. That way she knew she was crossing her T's and dotting her I's, right? So lots of possibilities. And then of course the catch-all is, hey, a combination of any one of these, or even a different objective that maybe you're thinking in your mind you want that I didn't even mention, right? So it could be a combination, and there's no right or wrong way to create a digital portfolio. It's really up to you as the educator. And what you have to think about is the why behind the digital portfolio creation in your classroom, because that why, that objective, that purpose is really going to guide a lot of the decision making. Because when you embark on this journey toward digital portfolios, you really have to ask yourself a bunch of questions before you get started. So we'll talk more about that. Okay. All right. So to begin with, I think about all of the skills in the why of portfolios. I mean, think about everything kids are doing, and we're going to talk through these different ideas, but, they're creating in our classrooms, they're writing and they're, presenting, and they're doing all sorts of different things that are creation. But then it's about collecting and organizing, right? And curating. So thinking about what we're going to include and why we're going to include it. The process of curation can be a big fun part of it, and it plays right in with reflection. So looking back at what we've created and thinking about, whether it meets the criteria for the portfolio, and then eventually, of course, sharing and publishing. So let's dive in and kind of think about some of these things. As we do, one of the things that I love about portfolios is that it really becomes this awesome opportunity for kids to make connections. So what do I mean by connections? Well, to begin with, they're going to make connections to the content. So I said it already, but I think it's so powerful to not only ask kids what they learned after a lesson or after a learning experience of some sort, but how did you learn it? And why did you learn it? What made this easy for you? What was challenging? And like I said, I taught kindergarten. And so even with the littles, talking to them about what made it hard or what made it easy, getting kids to think about how they took in information. Did they listen to a podcast, or did they watch a video, or did they just listen to the teacher's lesson? And what was the thing that made it so that they understood, so that they learned? Because if they can help themselves and you can help them figure that out, figure out who they are as learners, well, then that's an awesome opportunity for them to get to be a stronger, more powerful learner. So thinking about that process, I think, is huge. And that's part of the connection to the content that they make in this environment and in this portfolio environment. But then additionally, they make connections to each other and to you. So as you're going through these experiences together and they're reflecting, the questions that we can ask them, like, how did you learn this and why did you learn this, are not going to be answered easily. Kids won't know the answers at first. They're going to need time to talk with each other and talk with you. And it can be a neat opportunity for you to sit down and do some, goal setting and think about their progress and all of that. So they can do it in partners. They could do it in small groups. They can do it with you. And it's just a neat way for them to make connections with one another and you. So when we think about this, like, what do we do here then? How do we go from physical portfolios to digital? So I'd love to know from you guys, how many of you somewhere along the way in high school or college or graduate school had to make that 3-ring binder, right? The trapper keeper that Carlos mentioned. I had to make one. I graduated college in 1996. So this is actually 25 years that I've been educator this month. But I think about my 3-ring binder, that was my capstone project, right? In my bachelor's degree. How many of you, anybody want to admit that in the chat or talk about it? Even if someone wants to unmute and talk to me, that'd be great. Physical writing portfolios in all high school English classes. Justin, awesome. Yeah. When I was teaching at the K-8 building, we had a file folder, and every year each teacher would put in 3 writing pieces for each kid, and that was absolutely, yeah. So thanks AJ, and thanks Sue for admitting that. And Summer also, yeah, thank you. A lot of people, have to do that. And a lot of times it happens as that capstone project or, as part of a degree program. So, and then Nicole says, yes, my son has a portfolio binder from grades 1 through 5. And yeah, the large chunky binders were fantastic. I mean, they housed a lot of stuff. But think about it then when we can take it from that physical world and bring it into the digital world. I think about especially elementary teachers, and I am one, so I'm not teasing you. Well, I am teasing you, but you guys, we like to make stuff that's big. And sometimes it's 3D. My daughter had a scarecrow that they made in kindergarten as part of a fall unit. And that scarecrow followed us to 2 different houses as we moved. Finally, I was able to take a picture of it and get rid of it. But, we like to make things on big construction paper, and sometimes stuff is 3D. So when we were thinking about physical space, making it digital can be a really cool way of being able to save stuff and yet physically get rid of it, right? So we want physical stuff to happen in our classrooms. We're not going to turn to everything being digital. We know that's not the answer. This is the kind of stuff that we love, right? Like, look at this awesome cell diagram on the paper plate. Well, by taking a picture of it, it becomes a really easy way to be able to chronicle this learning, right? So think about for a second, do me a favor, and just think about what year or when your first experience was with a digital camera. Anybody want to throw a year in there? I'm going to tell you mine was like 2002. I think my district finally got a digital camera, and it was big and heavy and square. And we didn't let the kids touch it. It was for student use only. Anyone else want to share when your first digital camera arrived in your life, the impact maybe it made on you? Or anyone want to take a guess at why my first digital camera was big and heavy and square? Definitely early 2000s. Yep, Stephanie, Kara, thank you. Absolutely. Does anybody know which camera I'm talking about that was big and square? I think it was a Sony, an HP one. Yeah, absolutely. And it was high tech back then. It was a big deal to have the digital camera. So I appreciate the chats that are coming in, guys. I'll tell you right now that the reason my digital camera was mid-90s, heavy and slow, absolutely. The reason mine was square is because a floppy disk fit in it. And that's what we were using to record our very low resolution pictures, right? And now I think about our classrooms, and I think about iPads, I think about Chromebooks, and I think about how not only do we have digital cameras in the hands of every kid, or at least several of them in a classroom, right? But we've also got digital video cameras. And how amazing is that? So think about all these things that we can create and do. We can go through this incredible process that we're going to talk about. And we can create all of these different opportunities to chronicle learning. It doesn't all have to be on paper anymore, or that which is on paper can be recorded. So you guys, when you think about this process, it's very flexible, okay? These are some steps, and these are the steps that I've gone through. You may have other steps that you build in, and you may change the order of these, you know, so this is not a linear process. We don't start with collection and then do all the curation. It's not like we do all the collection at the beginning of the year and then all the curation in about November or December, and then all the reflection in January, and then we're publishing in May. That's not it, right? We're going to jump back and forth. We're going to collect all year long. We're going to curate and have conversations with kids all year long about, you know, why are we going to include this? Are we not going to include this? Why or why not? We're going to get them reflecting and thinking about it. Okay, so we're going to talk about all of this. So to begin with, you know, this is a collection. And I'm sorry, I was just looking really quick. I just love your chats in here, guys. Thanks for keeping those coming. I was just making sure you didn't have a question. So where are we going to put it? Right? The collection. So thinking about the 3-ring binder, thinking about the file folder, the box. Sometimes I had a classroom that had just shoe boxes, and each kid was putting their stuff in there. And, you know, the equivalent of that in a digital world is possibly, if you've got iPads in your classroom, like the camera roll of that, or very simply here in our Google workshop today, that Google Drive folder. It's a very simple answer to being able to hold, you know, all different file types, all different artifacts, everything from a picture to an essay to a presentation like a slideshow, but also audio recordings and video recordings, right? So those are all, you know, different ways that we can collect, and we can take anything that's physical and make it digital just by, you know, recording with that video camera that's embedded within our devices, right? So video or still camera, you know, and then of course, we're going to have those digital artifacts that are digital, right? So if kids are creating a blog, or if they're creating a website using Google Sites maybe, or they've made a Flipgrid video, things like that, you're going to have those digital artifacts as well that you can pull together and collect. And I think what happens is, as kids are doing this, they're able to look back, you know, and they're able to have these opportunities for pride and for joy. But in thinking about all the different things that are happening in your classroom, so we have everything from like our 3D models, right, to also our group work. So I've seen teachers that have actually recorded either video or audio, just group work, kids working together at a table and having conversations. And the focus was, hey, how well are we collaborating? Are we working together well as a group? And that in and of itself was an artifact of learning that went into their portfolio, and kids reflected on it because the focus in that case was the collaboration as well as the content. So, you know, anything that happens in our classrooms can be easily recorded and collected and put into that portfolio. So I think when we're thinking about this, what you need to decide first is kind of what your objective is, because when you do that, then it'll help your students as they're going through the curation process. Are you going to allow them, excuse me, to decide and curate? Or is it something that you're going to do together? Will you have a set of criteria? And you can do it any way you'd like, and it's going to change possibly as you move through this process, because the first time you do digital portfolios may look very different from the next time. And that's the neat thing about this, is that it can evolve and change, and you can, you know, streamline the process as you go along. So getting kids to think about, you know, whether or not, excuse me, I've just got a frog in my throat. Give me 1 second. Thinking about, like, hey, is this an evidence of growth? Is this an evidence of my increased skills? So my daughter, who is like 21 now, but this was back when she was in 6th grade, her teacher was focused on not only obviously science, but some study skills. And so she had the kids, after each learning environment, learning experience, reflect on whether they felt successful, and if they did feel successful, or if they felt disheartened or discouraged, why. So here she says, I'm proud of the A that I earned on this test. I remember I studied for 2 nights using flashcards and rereading the chapter as strategies for success. So they had outlined some different strategies for success, and then they would reflect on them as they went along after each learning experience. Maybe not each one, but different ones. So thinking about that, does this essay demonstrate growth? Why or why not? So getting them to think about this. What could I do differently next time? So guys, I know some of these slides are a little text heavy, but that's because we're going to share these slides with you, and I want you to have them. I want you to be able to take them forward and go back to them and get some ideas. I think the thing with reflection is that metacognition doesn't come naturally always, right? We don't always think about our thinking, think about our learning, think about who we are as learners, right? And if we can get kids doing that sooner rather than later, I think it's really going to help them. I didn't figure out that I need to read nonfiction out loud to myself until I was in college. If I'd figured that out when I was like 12, I would have done a lot better in high school and middle school. Okay. So, thinking about the kinds of reflection questions that you want to build in, it's going to look different in each classroom. And it may even be focused on, maybe your school has some social emotional learning that's going on. At our school, we did a different character trait each year. And that was kind of like we would do perseverance and respect and responsibility. And so a lot of our reflection questions were built around a certain theme. So all different ways to do it. Getting kids to think about all of the steps that they took to complete a project. So you guys, this is an example of a timeline, okay? And this timeline, it looks like, okay, it's a nice end product, but this is evidence of about 2 or 3 months of work. What happened in this 5th grade classroom is that kids went to a local retirement home and they got partnered up with a retired person who lived there, and he or she was interviewed by the student, and they explained their life. And then the kids were comparing and contrasting the things that they were learning in history, in American and world history, with what was happening in the person's classroom. So this simple Google drawing that was just a timeline is really evidence of a lot of work, several visits over to the retirement home, and a lot of learning that took place. And sometimes what happens is that final product, the Google drawing, the worksheet, the essay, just looks like one simple piece of paper, but it's really evidence of a lot. And so it's neat. That's when it's neat to kind of look back and get kids reflecting and get teachers reflecting. So, thinking about what our focus is for each of our lessons. Hey, this was a collaborative essay. How well did we collaborate on it? And as kids are working together and sharing their work with each other, then they're able to start giving each other, constructive criticism. They're able to think about feedback. And those are skills also that don't come naturally necessarily, right? So during this process, you can have kids team up. They can get into a small group, they can get into a partner situation, and they can share work with each other and say, hey, do you think I should include this in my portfolio? And they can have a set of questions that you've given them as guidance for the conversation, and they can start to talk. Sometimes, I don't know if any of you are verbal processors, but when I really want to think through an idea, I like to talk about it with someone and not just think about it by myself in my head. So, this can be part of making our classrooms more collaborative as well. Okay. So let me just stop for a second and see if anybody wants to unmute and share an idea, something that's either resonated with you or something that I've said that has made you think a little bit. You can feel free to type it in the chat, or you can unmute and talk to us. Maybe some of you are already creating portfolios with students and you're looking at it through a different lens that I haven't thought of. I'd love to hear that as well. I'm pretty good at this Zoom wait time, so I'm just going to give it another minute or so, see if anybody's typing or if anybody wants to unmute.
So I'll share something.
Great.
I think one of the most important things about student curated portfolios is what they're thinking about the work. And so I've noted all your prompts about questions for students asking, why they saved it or how they learned or didn't learn or how they were successful or not successful. And I think all those little questions will help my teachers sort of be able to make it more meaningful for students.
Great.
So thanks for sharing those.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for speaking up and coming on camera, Jean. I appreciate it. That's awesome. All right, I see a couple of questions or thoughts that came in the chat. Sue says, when the students produce, when students produce their video projects, we finish with a peer critique session asking lots of these questions. Great, awesome. And Kara says, I think this would be a great way to help support student modeling in my science class. They can look back at their work in order to put together their final models. Fantastic. I love these thoughts, guys. Thanks. Carlos, thanks for all the ideas. If people are feeling overwhelmed, I started this process just having them share e-binders with me, and then I can create a template pages based on those assignments. Awesome. And then you return with feedback. Perfect. Thank you, you guys. These are great, great chats. I appreciate it. I'm just looking to see if anybody's asking a question at all. Otherwise, I'm going to just let you guys read, feel free to read some of those chats that are in there because they're really great. Interesting, Donna, that just said, you just said, I will be changing it this year with less emphasis on the grading of the portfolio. So I bring that up a little bit later in my slides, the idea of, hey, is the portfolio itself being assessed, or is it a vehicle for assessment, right? And I think you can look at it a lot of different ways, and it depends on what you're teaching. So it's really, really good to ask that question. So, and then looking just to see, it looked like a question came in from Kara. How often do you work on feedback? Yeah, that's a great thing. I think feedback can try to get woven into, just the fabric of our everyday lives. And reflection too. I found that when you ask students to reflect as an afterthought, when I would ask kids, first of all, before audio and video was so easily facilitated, like back in the late 2000s, I would ask kids to reflect in writing on their writing. Boy, did I hit some resistance there, right? Like, what? You want me to write a paragraph and tell you how I felt about writing this paragraph? Like, they had no interest in that. But when I would just talk with them and reflect, well, then they were happy to do it. So the reflection and feedback, I find that when that can be verbal, it's better. So like using something like Flipgrid, and even using the screen share or the screen recording option in Flipgrid, right? Kind of like a Screencastify, and you could use Screencastify as well. But thinking about utilizing some kind of program like that, bringing up your Google Doc and then talking through it. So if I'm a student, I might just open up my Google Doc or my slideshow or whatever it is that I've created and talk about how it went for me as I was creating it. Like, oh gosh, when I got to this paragraph, I'm thinking upper level now, right? When I got to this paragraph, it was really difficult because the supporting evidence really wasn't there. And I found that my thesis sentence wasn't tight enough. And, those kinds of things can be really, really awesome opportunities for kids to think it through. And a lot of times when they're just kind of recording on their own, it's easier for them to think through that feedback rather than trying to have a conversation with their teacher. So it can kind of go either way. But if other folks have ideas for Kara in terms of, how often you work on feedback in your classroom, that's, I'd love to hear your answers. So that's awesome. All right, you guys, I'm going to continue my screen share and keep thinking through some ideas with you here. All right. So here, Jean just said, hey, I appreciated the questions and here's some more, right? So things like, is this an example of your best work? So if you are making a showcase portfolio, is this your best work and do you want to include it? Or if you're doing the growth portfolio, hey, is this something that shows your growth? Or would you categorize this as something that you're proud of? Why or why not? Or how did you feel when you were working on this? Was it challenging? Did you feel successful? What skills do you think you built? Or which skills do you think you improved? Or how did your work change from start to finish? If it was a longer project, how did your thinking change? So it just depends on what your focus is and what your purpose for the learning, activity is. So if you're really looking for kids to be not only writing an essay, but also creating a presentation together as a group, and collaboration is a really big part for you, then you're going to need to ask them questions about how well they collaborated, that kind of thing. And I'll definitely be sharing the slides of this session. So yeah, I see that, absolutely. And then you guys, when we get to the publish step, when we think about publishing, and when I want you to think about the word publish, I don't want you to think like necessarily wider audience, like the whole world. Publishing could be, hey, the second grade classroom across from my second grade classroom, we're going to flip flop and we're going to walk through and do a gallery walk of kids' Chromebooks and look at each other's portfolios, right? Or, you know, maybe we're publishing just to our parents and we're having like that family night where families can come in and take a look at what we've created, you know. And then again, if you are a teacher of older students, maybe you are creating the Google site or some other, you know, even or Google, and I'll show you different examples, but a Google Slides presentation where you've got this wonderful portfolio and it is out there, it is public. Thinking about that can be a really huge part of this, because when students create for the world or for that wider audience, someone beyond you, they really try to make it good. So the Rushton Hurley quote, when children create for the world, they make it good. When they create for their teacher, they make it good enough. You guys, that's me to a T freshman year, okay? I was in acting class and I was in algebra class. And mom expected, okay, Avra, I know you're not great at math, but if you can at least get a B, B minus, okay, that's what I got, because that's all she expected. But for acting, I had to write a monologue and then I had to get up and do it in front of my peers. So that was vastly different, you know. So when we think about publishing can be out there for the world, or it can be simply this, right? Putting something up on a wall. So this is publishing circa 2008. This is Allie again. And this was a night that made an impact on her. Talk about connections to content, okay? She was doing a presentation on Ronald Reagan. It was an academic fair. Families were invited. My parents came, so she got to wear Papa's tie and she got to wear her big brother's shirt. And she can still tell you stuff about Ronald Reagan because it meant something to her, right? She was sharing the stuff that she'd created in class with that wider audience. And so I think that's huge. And I think that when we make a connection with our hearts to the content, then our minds retain the information as well. And that's kind of what we want, right? So we also need to think about, of course, the digital citizenship piece. So if you are working with middle schoolers or high schoolers and you are having them start to put out information with their name on it, you're starting to help them build their digital footprint. You know, when we Google their name, will their essay from your 11th grade class come up? Potentially, right? So we know that our kids are already, you know, this is a Common Sense Media, and there it is linked in here for when you look at the slides later, but you know, we know that they're already putting themselves out there online. Even little guys a lot of times have, you know, some kind of social media presence. And so when we start to publish, we have the opportunity to do so with a walled garden, with your rules. We also have the opportunity to let students potentially make mistakes, and then for you to be able to guide them. And, you know, within the loving arms of your classroom, say to them, hey, listen, that's not the kind of activity or behavior or language we want to use in the online world, those kinds of things. You know, better for them to think about publishing and think about themselves as someone who's out there online in a classroom situation, which will help guide them then when they're on Snapchat and Instagram. They are not on Facebook anymore. My daughter told me the other day, Facebook is just for dorky adults. So just for your knowledge, kids are not on Facebook anymore from what I understand. So, you know, but they are in these social worlds. And this is just another byproduct of why portfolios and publishing student work can be fantastic. So let's think about now, those were some big picture ideas, right? Like why we want to do it and how we're going to do it. So let's think more granular at this point with like structure and organization. So to begin with, you've got some questions that you need to answer yourself. And my suggestion would be to really think this through because this is the stuff that I kind of just dove in and didn't think through carefully enough, and then was making the decisions, and I was kind of building the ship as I sailed it. So how do you want it to be organized, right? Is it going to be chronological? So are you going to start in September and start gathering stuff together and then have something for each month? Is it going to be topical? So are you going to have just by units? If you're an elementary teacher, is it going to be, you know, with the different curricular areas? You can have a math section and then an English language arts section and so on and so forth. Maybe you'll organize it by standards. Maybe you let your kids decide. So you have to think about whether or not your kids are old enough and whether you want them to have the choice there. We want to weave in voice and choice, but it's not going to be everywhere. You may say, hey, no, we're definitely going to do this chronologically. So you can think about how you know, what kind of structure you want to create for them. And as you do that, consider scope. Okay, because this is where I got too big. I went too big too quickly because I got really excited and a little overzealous. So, you know, elementary folks, are you guys going to weave in arts and music and other special classes? If a student sees a reading specialist, will you bring in some of the stuff that he does with him or her? Middle school, high school, are you going to work with your team? Is it going to be something like, I want us to do portfolios and I would really love for kids to gather work from each of their core classes? Or is it something that's just going to happen in your classroom? Those are all considerations, and there's not really a right answer. You can do it however makes sense for you. And it's just stuff that you want to kind of think about ahead of time, right? So also then, thinking about the organization, what are we gonna, you know, where are we gonna put it all and how is it all gonna work? I do just mention Seesaw, even though this is, you know, our focus is Google in these workshops. I know a lot of folks use Seesaw, and you can export your work out of Seesaw. You know, the 3-dot menu at the bottom of each of our students' learning artifacts that they create in there does have the option to share or save. So you can, you know, bring it out. And if it's a screencast they've created where they've worked a math problem, it's going to come out as an MP4. That MP4 file, that video file, can then be uploaded to Google Drive, and it could be included in a digital portfolio. It could be then inserted into a slideshow. It could be brought into a Google site. You know, there's lots of different ways to make the portfolios. But what we have to think about is, first of all, how we're going to organize it all. I will tell you that when I was doing it, one of the things that helped, I was working with, I think it was 5th grade through 8th at this point. We made a spreadsheet, and I'm just going to show you an example of it. We found that not all of the work was something that could be stored in Drive. And that was because, hey, it was, you know, an Adobe Spark page, or it was an Adobe Spark video, or it was a Flipgrid, you know, and so those have URLs, those have links, and or like a book creator book, right? So, you know, the stuff that can get stored in Google Drive is great, but then some stuff might be, you know, having their own URLs because it's within a program that's not Googly. So then in that case, you might create a spreadsheet for kids where they start to learn, you know, and they could even have some notes over here, or have some reflection. You know, that being said, guys, this in and of itself could be a portfolio. It's very rudimentary, certainly isn't pretty, but it's possible. You could start here as a jumping off place. It doesn't have to be the big, beautiful, polished Google site. This could be a way to just get started collecting student work and giving them a space for reflection, you know. So keeping that in mind, thinking about that, and thinking about the ways that you're going to organize it are going to be really important. Are you going to teach students to create the Google Drive folders? And if so, will you have individual folders within for each month or for each topic? So just think that through kind of before you get started. And then when you think about how you're going to put all this together, you do need to consider whether or not your own comfort level as an educator is going to dictate your students' experience. And here's what I mean by that. You may decide that every student in your class is going to create a Google slideshow, and the Google slideshow is going to have a picture of the work or a screenshot of the work, and then a spot for reflection, whether it's in writing or whether it's in audio or video. Okay. And that says, hey, listen, I know Google Slides, and I feel really comfortable with it. And so that's what we're going to do. And that's completely okay. Or you may be someone who has just a little bit more comfort and experience with technology in general. Maybe, you're a teacher of middle school and up, middle school, high school, and you're thinking, I want to offer my kids voice and choice. If they want to make a Google site, great, they can make a Google site. If they want to make a slideshow, great, they can make a slideshow. If they want to do it all in a document, that's fine too. So you might offer them choices and give them the chance to express themselves. But if that's overwhelming to you, then don't should on yourself. Okay. Don't say I should be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that, because there's no wrong way to do this. Here's what's going to happen. If you as a teacher should on yourself, oh, I should let them pick because I want to give them voice and choice, then the portfolio process, if you're not totally comfortable with it, is going to become one more thing that you have to do. And it's not going to be fun. And you're going to put it off. And all of a sudden it's going to be November and you're going to be like, oh, I haven't touched those portfolios in a month, right? So do what makes sense for you and what you have a comfort level with. And if you're a school leader, think about this for your teachers, okay? Don't expect them to be able to do every single program, because we're all learning. And frankly, technology changes so quickly. The programs we have this year, some of them didn't even exist a year ago, right? So it all happens so quickly, and we have to do what's manageable. And so just keep that in mind. And as you move forward through this too, think about your requirements, okay? And make sure that you are communicating the requirements ahead of time to kids. Think about whether or not you'll create a template, something that is going to be a guide for them, and they're just going to fit their work into the template, because you want everyone's to kind of follow the same kind of structure. Maybe you want that because then it's easier for you to get in and look at them and assess them and things like that. Or maybe this is where you want to let kids' creativity shine through, and you want to let them have all different ways of putting their work together. But then instead you have common requirements, things like a homepage or a table of contents, things like that. So think about all of that before you get started as well, because it'll help, guide the experience for yourself and for your students. So at this point, what I want to do is I'm going to pause before I jump into platforms, because I've got a couple examples to show you here, but I want to pause and just see how you guys are doing and see if anybody wants to share. And I'm just going to kind of peek at the chats here. So Pamela has the last thing. I have to agree. I want my students to have options, but I don't want to be clueless about their choices. Yeah, that's the whole thing. I want to be able to assist them through the process. So thinking about that, what Pamela just said is key, because if you are working on portfolios and kids are picking programs that you're not familiar with as they're building, then that's not good because then all of a sudden you aren't able to be the assistants for them. So absolutely, that's awesome. Anybody else want to share a thought that you're having right now? I'm just going to scroll through and see if anybody else asked a question in here at all. Oh, Pamela, I see also that you said your kids use Book Creator, but you're looking for some other way to have them build a creative, attractive, organized portfolio to demonstrate their learning. Yeah, so I'm going to suggest probably Google Sites to you because you've got high schoolers. So I'm going to show that option in just a minute when we get hands-on with the programs. So that's awesome. All right, looking and seeing what Robert said. I'd love to get a grade level portfolio established at some point. Key skills across grade 9, students tracking their thinking, seeing how they're writing, project work. Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, you guys. Nicole, do you find it's harder to create a digital portfolio using an iPad? I know for my younger students, they have difficulty using Google on them. Nicole, if I was a young kid teacher with iPads, I would probably go with Book Creator. And that's not one that I necessarily was focusing on today, just because we had a Google kind of focus for these workshops, but I do have examples of Book Creator digital portfolios. So if you want to email me, I'll put my email in the chat, but it's also in the slides, and we'll get that information out to you. You can chat with me and I can show you some examples. That's probably what I would do for the little guys. So, all right. Lots of ideas on adapting older projects and ideas. Cool. I've been using slides and docs for student presentations and peer reviews. Like these ideas. Awesome. Good. All right, you guys. So what I'm going to do for the last 10 minutes or so before we kind of get to the closing place is show you some actual examples. of digital portfolios created with digital tools, okay, with the Google tools. And thanks, Gail, for putting my email address in there. That's perfect. So I'm going to show you some actual examples, and then we'll talk about, the how a little bit for each one. So one thing I do want to mention is starting small. Okay, think about your purpose for the digital portfolio and think about how big of a project you want to take on. Here's my suggestion. Think about a unit of study. Okay, one unit of study that you can just say, okay, we're going to be doing, it's January, we're looking at Martin Luther King, civil rights. Every kid is going to create a slideshow. Every kid's going to write an essay, and we're going to do a photo collage. Okay, I want 3 artifacts from each kid, whether you've got 25 or whether you've got 6 different groups of 25, right? I want each kid to put together at least 3 or 4 artifacts in one place, and boom, we're going to call that a portfolio. It is, you guys, it doesn't have to be a September through June kind of thing, okay? Because it's a collection of work. And when you start small, guess what you get to do? You get to start and you get to finish. Sometimes just seeing a process through all the way can increase your feelings of self-efficacy and completion and success. You as a teacher need to feel successful and in control of this environment, because otherwise it's just going to be frustrating for you. So if you can do that, then what you can do is you can reflect on it and go, okay, here's what I liked. Here's what didn't work well. This is what I would do differently next time, that kind of a thing. So thinking about it, maybe you just do it over one semester and then you start again or something like that. But think about starting small. So let's look at Google Drive. So Google Drive, how is that a portfolio, Avra? Well, let me go back to my school where we had file folders. Okay, file folders had maybe like 20 sheets of paper in them by the time they graduated 8th grade. That was a portfolio. It's a collection of work. Well, if we look at this Google Drive folder, it's a collection of work. And you can have all different stuff from MP3s and MP4s, right? So audio files, video files. You can have JPEGs in here. We can have stuff that was created digitally. We could have stuff that was created physically, and then we took a picture of it. This in and of itself is a portfolio. So if you're focused this year, maybe you've got little guys and it's a lot for them to create a Google Drive folder and then maybe some subfolders and put some stuff together in there. That process in and of itself is a process. So, hey, is that where we're going to start? The thing with Google Drive is that it doesn't really have a great place for reflection to be built in. Okay, you could do some reflection in Flipgrid. You could put some, audio files in here or video files. Maybe you create Screencastify screencasts where kids open up their Google Doc or they open up their Google slideshow and they talk through their process and they reflect on it, right? Though that can happen and it can be in here, but it doesn't naturally have a nice clean look and it's very rudimentary, but it is a jumping off place. So I do like to mention it, okay? Now let me go to the next, maybe if we're going on a continuum here, the next least fancy, okay, is a Google Doc. So a Google Doc, you guys, this is an environment that our kids know. It's an environment that most teachers know. You could start here, right? You could be clicking on, these different links and you could have just a paragraph of a reflection, right? So this is possible as well. Again, not fancy, but for those of you that are familiar with Mote is an audio recording tool. You could put Mote into a comment over here. So what Mote does, guys, and it's just a Google Chrome extension, it allows you 30 seconds of reflection, okay? Not very long, but it would be possible. And 30 seconds might be enough for some kids to just talk through, what they learned from an experience, what they learned from the creation of a slideshow or something like that, okay? So this is, these are two that are, again, rudimentary, but possible. And then when we get into ones that can look, excuse me, a little bit more polished, and beautifully integrate video and audio and images, that's when we can get into something like a slideshow, okay? So this is a slideshow from, this is a template from an actual middle school down in Texas. And I always like to show it because it's, it's lovely, and it can be this, very organized environment. And teachers can create one, and then using Google Classroom, you can push it out and give each kid a copy, and then all they have to do is go to each page and fill things in the way that they've been taught to do. That's one possibility. And then you can also just use the slides environment to, build out a presentation that, let me just pull this up real quick. Hold on, Martin Luther. I apologize. I thought I had this linked and I didn't. Portfolio. You can also build out something that's got the picture of the artifact and then a space for a reflection. The reflection can be a reflection in Moat. Okay, again, here we could use Moat to reflect. So I could go through the process, and I won't do it now, but I could go through the process of recording my voice and explaining my presentation and talking about, the things that I felt I grew and all those reflection questions that we looked at earlier. We can have a space for, the actual work if we want to, as well as, our paragraphs of reflection if we want to. If we need to, in Google Slides, we can also link out to other programs. We could link out to a Flipgrid video. We could link out to a book creator book that we've created, all different possibilities. And it comes together beautifully in this environment. And then, yeah, and you guys can have copies of all of this. This is all in the slides, and you guys can make copies of stuff, absolutely. And so I will throw this one in there too before we share all the slides out with you guys. But lots of possibilities here. And then I think the one that that a lot of times when people think portfolio, they're thinking Google Sites, okay? And Google Sites has become such an amazing environment for portfolio creation. This one is one that I teach undergrads in the evenings, and these guys, this is their final project for me was a portfolio of all the different things that we learned. So, you've got wonderful menus that get built in, and you can create text boxes and have your images in here and all of that. And you can also, within Google Sites, you can embed. So you can embed a Flipgrid video right within Google Sites. You can embed a book creator book right within Google Sites. So if I jump into Google Sites just quickly and show you an example of just a demo one that I've created, let's take a look at what this could look like. So this is where we build here in Google Sites. And of course, guys, we don't have the time to talk about the how of each program. But let's go in and just see what's possible here. So look, we've got space for pictures and text, right? We've also got space for things like a Flipgrid video. Okay, so this can be embedded and can be played right on the site.
So in order to solve 3x plus 5 equals 14, I know that I need to get x by itself.
So any video, right? Anything that's stored in Google Drive, or you can use the embed options in Google Sites to embed your Flipgrid stuff and pull everything together, in here. So you've got lots of opportunities to pull together from all different environments and all different types of media in Google Sites. And the way Google Sites works is that you've got an insert menu here. You've got a pages menu here, okay? And you can create pages, and then you can create sub pages. So across the top, we've got September, October, November, December. And if you notice, November and September here, they both have these little carrots next to them. Well, that's because those have sub pages. So maybe you start out simple and you just do one thing, on each month. And that's huge, you guys. If your students, if you get, you get a portfolio for each kid with each month of the year, and you get one artifact down there, reach around and give yourself a pat on the back, right? Because that's huge. But then maybe the next year you're like, okay, I think we're going to have a couple different September things, and we're going to have a couple different October artifacts, and you can do that as well. And so you can build all of that over here in the pages menu. So, so this, Google Sites, if you're really a Google school and looking to build something in here, I would say from 3rd or 4th grade up, this is a program that's manageable. And I'm not trying to discount K-1-2. If you're a littles teacher, you can teach them. It would just take a lot more one-on-one work with them and hand holding. I've done it. I've gone as low as second grade creating Google sites, but it was in a technology class where I was the teacher and that's all we did in the class, so I'm not trying to say that our little guys can't handle it, just trying to be realistic about it. So that's kind of what we're thinking when it comes to Google tools and building out using these as the platforms for digital portfolios. So we are almost out of time, you guys. We're about 5 minutes. What I would love at this point would be for you to reflect for a moment. Okay, so I'm gonna stop talking for about 60 seconds and let this information sink in. And then I'd love for you to share in the chat. You can answer this prompt, I used to think, but now I think, something that resonated with you, something that you're thinking about moving forward. Okay, so I'm going to just stop and let you think, and then feel free to type in the chat. So I'm reading these awesome comments that are coming in, and this is the kind of stuff that, is music to my ears or eyes as I'm reading it, because it makes me feel good that you guys are even things like, hey, I was overwhelmed before, but now I've got hope that maybe it's, more doable, more manageable, right? I think it's really, really important for you as teachers to make sure that whatever you do is manageable. Don't bite off more than you can chew, okay? Because that'll just mean frustration for you. And I don't want you to feel frustrated. I don't want you to feel like you're not getting everything done and all of that, because that's just an awful way to feel. You want to feel successful, because when you feel successful, then your kids are going to feel successful, and that's what we want. So one thing I will mention, and I appreciate all of these comments, and I want you to know that I will go back and reread them, because that's what I'll do, and it'll make my heart happy. So thank you. But one thing I want you to know as well, and I forgot to put the link in here, but if you reach out to myself or to Gail, my director at EdTechTeacher, we actually have a self-paced course where I talk through these ideas, obviously a lot more slowly and deliberately, and it's something that's unteachable. So it's something that people can sign up for and just do it at your own pace. So if you're ever interested in that, shoot me an email or send Gail an email. Her email address is gail@EdTechTeacher. Many of you know her. So this last slide as well, guys, has a link to a feedback form. So I'm going to throw this into the chat. And awesome, Gail, you're fantastic throwing that link in there. So I'm going to throw this in here for you as well. If you guys wouldn't mind giving us some feedback about this session, that would be wonderful, because it's going to help guide us as we plan future sessions. So does anybody have, you're welcome, AJ, absolutely. Does anybody have a question, or does anyone want to, unmute and say anything? Or if you have a question, put it in the chat and I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day. Good luck getting your school year started. If you have any questions, feel free to email me afterwards too. That's a really good point. Gail just put in there, like, this was a Google session. So there are other other programs as well that I didn't go to, but that course does talk about other programs as well. So you're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks so much for coming, you guys. Have a great day. Good luck getting your school year started in a couple weeks. Absolutely. You are welcome. I'm glad you've enjoyed the sessions, Gail. That's awesome. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.